Hey, everybody, you're listening to and watching the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Bill Zanowitz.
And I'm Steve Morey.
And we are your hairy, heavy homos that talk about comic books, but you don't have to be a hairy, heavy homo to listen in, or in this case, stream in. And we're here with you again on a Wednesday night because I have a concert tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about that because there's like a bit of an anniversary story behind that. And we are going to be talking about Black Widow, which is the first MCU film to hit screens and television screens simultaneously in this case, since Spider-Man Far From Home. Was that the last one? Okay.
That was.
And that would have been summer of 2019?
Sort of like right? Thanksgiving time.
All right. All right. So I'm a few months off. Yeah. And we naturally have a few comic books to talk about. We'll start off, though, talking about what we're wearing. Steve, tell us about what you have on there. It's a cute little shirt.
Oh, well, I just have one of my fun sort of mashups of the child Grogu, or Grogery as I've started to call him, gnawing on the head of Kermit the Frog. Because, of course, Disney eats Disney.
Mm-hmm. And what I have on is a Superman v. Batman shirt, or Batman v. Superman, which was the actual title. This is actually the top of pajamas. So, but it's comfy, and sometimes I wear it. So we have that there. So I'm not sure what we really should do with the structure. We're probably going to only last about an hour tonight. And we were also talking before we started the show about, segments and, we always have the Wolves of the Week segment. When we do have interviews, that's a bit more formalized. But as I was sitting down here, I'm realizing that I am surrounded by a bunch of stuff. So we're just going to do a little show and tell here. So, again, it was recently my birthday, and my other half got me this awfully cute fella, which is Eduardo from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, He's going to show my tushy. I love this guy. I'm very happy with this. It's one of my favorite cartoon shows. I got some cool vinyl the other day. Yesterday. This is the soundtrack to Dark Knight's Metal. I'm sorry about the glare, but I have a light that's right above me here. Has a number of tracks by some bands I love, like Idols and Mastodon, and 500 copies only of this on red vinyl, and I believe there's 500 copies on yellow vinyl. So if you ever do see these Loma Vista tie-ins with DC, get them right when the pre-order happens, because you probably won't have a chance otherwise. But my world's crossing together, my music and comics all together there. What else I got surrounding me in my staging area here? Black Hawk, Blood and Iron. If you know me, I love Black Hawk. I was waiting for this to come down to a discounted price, and I was able to through in-stock trades. And this collects the original Chaykin written and drawn miniseries from the late 80s, and then the appearances of the character in Action Comics Weekly and in Secret Origins. So since those were, a bunch of different cases, a bunch of different books, it's the first time they've been collected in one thing. So there's that. And I got a birthday present from a certain co-host. I got a nice little box of stuff, but this one was for me the highlight. And this is the unofficial, or I guess you can say fan-made collection of the Superpowers mini comics that were inserted into the action figure packs, and it's actually reprinted at the actual size. So you have all 12 reproduced.
Did we lose you there for a second?
You lost me there for a second. I lost you
just
for
a second.
So
there we go.
Anyway, just to repeat, these were these card, on the back of the cards, there's this little information. So just a slight tweaking, no point in providing some subscription information from 35 years ago. It doesn't really make too much sense. Yeah, and then in terms of comic books, if you know me, you know I do these trivia contests and auctions with a local store on Wednesday nights, and here's some of my recent gets on the trivia. Uh, Mid 70s Defenders issue, early Guardians of the Galaxy appearance, some X-Men, some Batman, Mr. Miracle, early 70s World Finest. So,
Mm-hmm.
and that's all because I know things. So.
You
So
drink beer and know things,
So
as the
that's some of
saying
the stuff
goes.
that's surrounding me here. So, Steve, how about you? You have
Well,
stuff
see,
there that you can show off?
when it comes to acquiring things, most of the time I just get them when I randomly am at a comic shop or whatever. I'll find a trade that just calls to me. And the other day when I was picking up my comics down in Charlotte, and I've read quite a few of them. You know, we've talked about them on this show. But one of the latest DC Kids graphic novels is Mystery of the Meanest Teacher, featuring Johnny Constantine and
Mhm.
Zatanna. And it just, it looks fantastic. It's written by Ryan North, of course, who is fantastic himself. Art by Derek Charm, who's done a lot of all ages comics as well as some other titles. That one just kind of jumped into my hand. I have no idea how it happened and how I paid for it, but the I did pay for it. I didn't steal it. I was like, I have to get this.
Yeah.
And then the other one is actually something that just came. And this was a recommendation, if you recall, several weeks ago. Our sometimes co-host Caleb, the Wonder Cub, actually did provide this as his book that he wanted to talk about, and I liked the idea of it so much, I just had to get it myself. So, Fictional Father by Joel Ullman, which was really funny because after this came, I listened to an older podcast, actually a rehash of an aired radio show from Colin McEnroe that talked about the Connecticut School of Cartoonists that basically made the comics in the Sunday Funny papers all across the United States for the syndicates, starting in like the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. A lot of those guys were from Connecticut, which I had no idea. And of course, a lot of them were a family affair. So you had some fathers passing it on to their sons, who would then take over the reins of either writing or the art or both. And that's kind of ostensibly what the book is about, but from a very interesting and cynical and less exciting perspective. But very good, according to Caleb. And I started reading this, and so far I really do agree. So those are the two things that I've just kind of picked up. The rest of it isn't anywhere close to me. So
I do
man,
have that Johnny Constantine book over there that did come in my last DCBS box. I haven't gotten
excellent.
through as many comics as nearly as I wanted to because of life,
Work,
Yeah, there's that.
concerts.
Yes, concerts. This is the reason why we are not going to be live streaming tomorrow. Me and my, who I call my straight concert husband, Tom Moynihan, the first concert we ever went to together was Joe Jackson with Jill Sobule opening at Radio City Music Hall on July 15th, 1991. Now, what are the chances? But the two of us tomorrow on July 15th, 2001, 30 years to the day, we'll be seeing Jill Sobule perform.
2021.
2021. What
Yeah,
did I say?
2001.
Oh, 2021. No. Sorry. A little
Was
distracted.
it 30?
Yep.
Yeah. Wow. That is
30
yeah.
years to the day. Yeah. And it's also my first time being in New York since March 7th, 2020.
Wow.
So that'll be interesting in and of itself. So we're seeing the show at City Winery, but it's a new location for City Winery. The old one that was over by the Holland Tunnel closed. So it's new and old at the same time. So
Everything old
yeah.
is new again, and everything new is old.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I see
that's
we have about a couple people watching. I see David Toby and I see Anthony Comito.
yeah. David
There's
Toby
more
says, "Hey,
people
boys."
given the I and the number that's after that, but don't know
Yeah,
who they are. So thank you for joining us. Especially thank you
yeah,
for joining us on a night that's not our usual night and at a time that's not our usual time. So
yeah.
we do appreciate
We're
that.
we've just gone crazy this week with our with our date and our time. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, for a special reason. So,
Yeah. All right.
but that's awesome.
All right. Well, we're already 11 minutes in, and I think we both have a lot that we want to say about Black Widow. So why don't we start off with you giving some kind of plot synopsis? And I also have to say, really good appearance last night on the Movie Bears podcast
Oh,
talking
thank
about
you.
this. Really enjoyed tuning in for that. Um, so yeah, so you're already a veteran talking about this film. So let's get you going.
Oh, thank you, and yeah, thanks again to the Movie Bears for having me on last night. That was it was a lot of fun as always, and you can also watch the broadcast of that on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio version when it is available. So quickly, Black Widow is the first Marvel movie in over a year and a half at this point. It was supposed to premiere last year in May. Unfortunately, a little thing happened that kind of pushed everything out. And not only that, it was supposed to premiere this year in May, but still got pushed out another 2 months. Again, because we weren't where we needed to be COVID-wise and vaccination-wise. But it did premiere just this past Thursday, Friday. And it premiered both on the big screen as well as on the Disney Plus streaming app. For their premium access for $30, and then you get to watch it whenever. So quick synopsis of it. Basically, it gives us a interesting glimpse into the backstory of Natasha, the Black Widow, when she was a young girl. As part of an embedded family in Ohio, spying for the Soviet Union on the American soil for a very specific cause that becomes important later on in the movie. But it establishes a family for Natasha. So it's Natasha, her younger sister Yelena, and her parents Melina and Alexei. And of course, what's revealed later on is that they are all spies that were all put there, and the family unit was created artificially. Fast forward basically about 30 years, and Natasha's on the run from the U.S. government thanks to the events of Captain America: Civil War, where the Avengers split up, and half of them went on the run, and the other half were basically hunting them down. So Natasha ends up hooking up with her Urzat's sister, Yelena, who has recently come out of her stupor, or basically her programming from the Red Room. She's been an assassin like the Black Widow, like Natasha was for years, killing targets that the Red Room has given for her. And the two of them together are trying to basically get the MacGuffin to a place where they can destroy the Red Room, and in doing so, they bring the old family together. Alexei, who happens to be the Red Guardian, the Russian super soldier, and their other mother, Melina, who apparently is the creator of some of the conditioning for the Red Room. So there's a lot of action, a lot of fun. Some really crazy twists and reveals. The big bad Taskmaster, only one of the villains in here. The real villain, of course, behind the scenes, played by Reed Winstone. Very interesting appearance there. And it was just a lot of fun. There's the usual Marvel stuff, lots of explosions, lots of great writing and quips, and some really snappy plotting, and of course, the usual stinger at the end. So it's a great Marvel movie. It was a lot of fun to go and see. Bill, what did you think of it?
I loved having a Marvel movie again, though we've had an abundance of riches on the TV screen. We haven't had that creature known as a Marvel movie in some time, again, for the reasons that you cited before. I did really appreciate that it avoided what was the most problematic thing about Black Panther for me, and that Black Panther at points, I felt like he was a bystander in his own film. And with this film, you didn't have that at all, because it's though there certainly are anchors in the film that are around the supporting characters. It is the Natasha centric element to it, I thought was realized far greater than some of the other films where you've had supporting characters that do branch out into their own film. And you can also make that comparison to, at least the Disney Plus series. I loved the balance of humor in the movie, where you did have David Harbour with the big hearty laugh moments, but then you had Florence Pugh, who I think this was like a star-making vehicle for her. Just wonderfully understated and wry, and a pain in the ass like a little sister should be, I think,
Yeah.
in certain ways. I thought Rachel Weisz was fine. I wasn't as taken by the version of Taskmaster that they provided, and mainly because I thought that Tony Masters and his story, the main Taskmaster in the Marvel Universe, I think that's a very interesting story, and I would rather not be denied that. In the cinematic universe. And I hope that doesn't come out as sexist or anything. But it certainly isn't meant to. But I just thought that the character that you have in the comics is very fleshed out and very complicated. He basically has no ideology apart from his employers at the time. Though he is a villain, he does have numerous connections to heroes, principally U.S. Agent. And that his ability to mimic the fighting styles of other people, that being a natural ability, I think is a far more interesting device than what we were provided there. But again, that's nitpicking. It's not, the movie's not called Taskmaster.
No.
I loved, as a huge fan of The Americans, I absolutely loved the first 20 minutes of the film. It certainly wasn't a nod, but it was unavoidable given the story structure that they decided to go with. And I did love that, even at the end of this, there's still so many mysteries surrounding Nastasha. And I always go back and forth between Natasha and Nastasha. I'm sorry, I've always done that my entire life.
Interesting.
I always felt that, given what we've seen in the films, that and again, the two characters that are talked about the most from their past, from the past events in this film, are Black Widow and Hawkeye, who is not in the film, but in a way does have a presence in two particular ways. I never felt that they were strong enough characters to carry a film, and this really proved me wrong. It's also, being a flashback film, I think, was in a way liberating. They're bound by the time, but not much else, because the story is so wildly different from what happens in the rest of the Marvel universe, and the rest of the MCU. And I know all the bear love is headed towards David Harbour, but let's give it up to Ray Winstone as well. And I thought, as a movie to come back to, as a movie that's kind of in its own way saying, we made it through, or it looks like we made it through. That it isn't the blockbuster film that something like a full-on Avengers would be, I think is a wise step, in a sense, like almost a marketing accident. I think it's a very good film to welcome back a franchise with. And I really enjoyed it. And just trying to think if there's any other observations I had that I wanted to bring out there. What did you think of the performances? Because it seemed that there was it seems when you were talking last night that there were sidesteps with some other issues. So
no,
I
think
want
the
to hear what you thought.
To be honest, I think the performances were excellent. I think there was, ScarJo was true to her character. She didn't play it any wackier. Like, it wasn't, she wasn't a more serious version or a less serious version of Black Widow. She played Black Widow the way she has been for the past 13 years or
Mhm.
so. But what really was surprising, I think, was how easily the partnership between her character and Florence Pugh's character of Yelena were. Like, I think it really got into a very good partnership pattern, and so the actors were able to really play off each other, I think, in there. And the dialogue between them, because of course Florence usually had some of the really fun zinger lines, it was great. I mean, she characterized the bratty younger sister very well. And Natasha's sort of like knows a lot more, is more emotionally mature, but also still has this, this long affection for her sister. It came through very well. I don't think they really had to, really hammer a lot of stuff dialogue wise. They didn't really have to. In most cases, you could just get it from just the two of them being on screen and interacting well together. David Harbour is always fun. The Russian accents was very interesting how three of them had a Russian accent, but Natasha didn't, which I don't get, because of course they could all be potentially speaking Russian the whole time, and we just don't know it because of the magic of movies.
That didn't bother me because I do know somebody that grew up in Australia until they were 7. And they've basically lost most of their Australian accent apart from a few words. And that was believable to me because it's not something she's normally engaged with. And I think at this point in her life, the Russian accent would be a cover. So that didn't bother me at all. I think there's various justifications for that.
Sure. I mean, honestly, they could have done it either way. They could have all, not had an accent because they clearly didn't have an accent when they were undercover in the U.S. But there's a bunch of things they could have done about that. But those are nitpicky. I don't need to nitpick on this movie. I enjoyed being there in the theater, getting to laugh out loud and enjoy some of the explosions, enjoy the there were some moments that were big surprises and some great big twists that I really enjoyed that I didn't see coming, which was very it is always nice to have, especially in a Marvel movie. And David Tobey actually mentioned something about the MCU keeps forgetting that Natasha's a spy. I think in this one they did give her a couple opportunities to express the espionage aspect of her character in a way that she really hasn't had a chance to do since Captain America and the Winter Soldier, which was, is my favorite MCU movie up to this point. And I think this really shares a lot of the same DNA as the Captain America films, and that there's a lot more real world perspective to it, and there's a lot of grounded in the grounded abilities of the main characters. So even though Alexi's a bit of a super soldier, and Elena and Natasha have insane assassin moves, there's something about their characters that makes them a little bit more vulnerable and more human, that is easier, I think, to feel that there are very strong stakes in what they're doing and how they're doing it. Even though we know Natasha would survive, clearly, because she has to die in Avengers Endgame. But it was good. I really loved it, and I'll see it again for sure.
Okay. Just trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to cover. The one thing I do have to say is I'm very happy that we are getting Yelena, or White Widow, or whatever the hell we're going to be calling her, in Hawkeye. The motivation as provided makes some sense.
Yeah. She doesn't have to. How does she know? How does she know what went down?
Does she know? I didn't think that particular Stinger cameo was as riotous and fun as what we saw in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but from what I also understand, they cut it in half because that was basically her. This is now her second appearance without the first one, and I'm being deliberately coy about naming the character and the actress because if you haven't seen it, you need to know. I want to leave something fresh for you, and I also don't think there's any reason why we can't see Red Guardian in something down the road too.
Or out of
Wonderful
something
take
like
on the
completely
character. Yeah, wonderful take on the character, and
Red Guardian in costume, Red Guardian out of costume.
I'd love to see him meet up with one of the patriotic heroes. That would be a
Yeah.
riot. And even his commentary, I saw him as a contemporary. Uh, you know,
Which we're
uh,
not sure how because
yeah,
Steve Rogers was in ice, but
it's a big. But then again, he may have gone under something that the Winter Soldier also did. So his mind might also be fucked up. And you have to think about that,
or not. I mean, we
or not.
do we
They
do
could
know that
always,
Eli's grandfather from Falcon and Winter Soldier
yeah.
was Captain America briefly before it was all covered up. So maybe there were some other Captain Americas in
Okay.
there. Yeah, who knows?
So
But,
there you go, Black Widow,
yeah.
and then we also had Loki ended today. We weren't
We need to
really
go
talking
into
about
that
that,
at
but
some other time.
you will have to get into that at some other time. We
Yeah.
did have the introduction of a big baddie, and I have to say just briefly about Loki. As an episode, I thought it was fine. The last episode, as a season finale, I thought there were issues.
Hmm.
So, but it's also hard to view these shows as in the conventional sense of how you would structure a television season. Um, it's a little strange, but we've had an abundance of MCU, but just not in the C. So again, we're back. It looks like we're really back. So,
Yeah. And we've got Shang-Chi comes out in less than 2 months.
mhm.
And yeah, I mean, we're going to be seeing that, the Eternals, and another Spider-Man movie by the end of the year. So we've got a full packed Marvel year to go. Venom 2, it's adjacent to Spider-Man, but not to MCU, I think.
Yeah.
It just exists. Don't think about it too hard. It's just a Venom movie. But yeah,
No,
for the
but
MCU, we're going to get the
I
4.
do think with what you saw in Venom, that they were going under the standpoint that doesn't make any sense, but in the view that they're not going to do anything that contradicts stuff.
Yeah.
And I thought you saw that pretty well done in Venom. We also have Morbius, which completed filming and it's just been shelved for a little while.
Keeps getting pushed and pushed, but
yeah.
it'll be
we'll and I have to say the Morbius trailer I thought looked pretty good. I mean, it looked like Morbius, that's for goddamn sure. Which is not something you always get in these films.
Well, it's not something you always get from Jordan Catalano. So
yeah.
Anyway, David, of course, has let us know that he does agree with you, Bill, about Loki. That the season finale felt like a penultimate episode.
Yes.
It kind of had that. I think that's probably the fault of episode 5, which was so exciting and dynamic and riotous and crazy. And this was a very subdued episode with a lot of exposition. So that being said, if you haven't seen it yet,
there's also a decent amount of physical scenes.
There's some.
If you add them up, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The name of the show is Comic Book Bears. We're going to talk about comic books. So let's start with you. Tell us about a few things that you're reading that you're digging.
So we may have mentioned them on the podcast before, but I don't think we've actually read or reviewed anything together as a group. And that is the publisher Bad Idea, which, as a very bad idea, has decided that they don't want to really promote their stuff the traditional way, make their comics available the traditional way, only partner with so many comic shops, and no reprintings. They do have reprintings, multiple, but very limited print runs, one comic per sale, blah, 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 all of that stuff. So it is what it is. And of course, they just announced recently that they're going to be ending this experiment at the end of the year with a few more miniseries that they're coming out with before December. But in the meantime, one of their new releases, and this just came out, is The Lot, by Marguerite Bennett on writing duties, and Renato Guedes as the artist. I've read several of the other Bad Idea books. Some of them are okay. Some of them are just bad ideas. So, but this one is a very interesting premise. It is a horror book. I think probably their first horror genre book, first and last maybe. But the basic plot of it is a woman named Aviva, super high achiever, has basically been made the new CEO of a small film studio, a sub studio underneath one of the major big studios. And one of the things that she does when she comes in to turn around the fortunes and basically prove herself is she finds some interesting costs related to an old, some old sound stages that have been on the books that the company's been paying for, but nobody's been using mysteriously for about 30 years. Or actually 50 years, for about 50 years. So, of course, she and some of her other friends are also, high-achieving Gen Yers, decide that they are going to be cleaning up the studio and bringing back, its purpose in making films and, really turning around and making the studio a fortune. Well, unfortunately, the soundstage is severely cursed due to the actions of several producers and filmmakers 50 years prior that resulted in the awful, bizarre, and violent deaths of several actors for their benefit. So prolonged life, extra success, genius, etc., all of these things. And instead of just saying, like, fuck this shit, I'm out of here, Aviva decides, we're going to solve this curse. We are going to completely tell these ghosts and demons and whatever that they can fuck right off, because I am going to be turning around the studio, making this a shit ton of money, and ending the curse at the same time. Which, how she's going to do that, who knows? This is only the first issue. But I loved it. The art is absolutely fantastic. It's very painterly. There's a lot. It's all mostly in black and white. A lot of great contrasts in here. And of course, Marguerite Bennett, she's never really had a bad book in my mind. So I really do recommend it. If you can even find it, that's the problem. I hate having to recommend it and knowing that, for most of you, there may only be one store in the entire state that you're in that actually sells them. But if you do find it, check it out. The lot just released this month.
I have to say their business model was really confounding.
Yeah, you think it'd be a bad idea to try and do business that way.
There didn't seem to be any upsides to it. That you're going to piss off more people than you please. And that just didn't seem to be a wise way to at least enter the market.
Yeah.
We had talked about a particular Robert Kirkman book, and that was done with a wink and and a bit on the sly, and it's material that's not available digitally, which I thought was really interesting, and it just seemed to be just a nutty way of entering the marketplace with these works. Maybe that was something that could be once the imprint's established somewhat, but just seemed nutty to me.
It seemed like and I think the way it ended up being is essentially a clearinghouse, high premium quality. I mean, the book quality is gorgeous. It's definitely a high quality printing. Definitely worth the $3.99 or $4.99 you're paying for it. But really, it just ended up being a clearinghouse for other creator-run ideas that just didn't make it at other publishers for whatever reason. I mean, not necessarily because they're bad, but maybe just because they didn't fit in with the current model and they wanted to get it done, or something that came up in the pandemic that they were able to to create and needed a place for it. I mean, it's this and one of the other books, ENIAC, are just great reads. So, great to recommend, but it's hard to recommend because it's hard to find. And I feel really bad. It's like, try finding it. You might not, but if you do, you'll enjoy it. Hopefully, but it is what it is. Did you have ones you wanted to talk about, or do you want me to just jump right into my second book? Jump right in.
Here I am, I'm mute, and I'm like saying stuff, and I got dusty hands going. So yeah,
Spirit
Dusty
fingers.
Hands refers to Dusty Springfield, the singer from the '60s, who had. Sometimes you have to explain this stuff. There's gray in the beard, and I know not everybody's going to get all these references, but
Donkey
so
String Bean, you mean?
I was just doing Dusty. It's just shut up.
Donkey
Let's
String Bean,
shake things
everybody.
up a little bit. You talk about something else you're reading, and then I'll come in with a few things that I've gone through.
Awesome. Well, so we do talk about them a lot, but because Brian, our wonderful Brian, has not been able to join us for such a long time on the show, it feels like forever, but I know it's only been a couple months. He is our resident X-Men dude, who has to talk about the X books, what they've been going through, and I've been trying to do it a little bit just to kind of keep us up, and I know Caleb has as well. But I've been following the X books, and we just came off finally the Hellfire Gala that finally ended. Took the entire month of June and all the X books, essentially to get to this, which is the new X-Men #1. Not the old new X-Men #1 that just happened last year. But this one, we have the new team that's been revealed in the Hellfire Gala crossover. And they've moved into New York. So they've built this beautiful tree house that's really cool to set up as their headquarters. They're basically there representing Krakoa, but also acting specifically as a hero team, like the Avengers, like the Fantastic Four. So they're back kind of doing their bread and butter, which is saving the citizens of New York and the world from whatever threat. And of course, the threat this time is just a very interesting sort of one-off, possibly. Some giant alien from nowhere comes in and starts, melting everybody's brains. So the X-Men, are really close by. So they, of course, combine their powers and create a Megazord X-Mecha, this giant robot, basically, to fight this giant alien tentacle creature that's come to fight. So it was definitely a Power Rangers moment, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. It's always a good time. Most always a good time in an X-Men book, and this was pretty fun. Didn't take itself too seriously, but of course, around the edges of this introductory story of the new team is the old team is the new team. We do get a moderate introduction to a new supervillain and a new antagonist to the X universe, who basically had his plans ruined when the mutants of Krakoa terraformed Mars, because that was his life's work, and now it's ruined. So of course his new life's work is destroying the mutants and destroying Krakoa. So obviously we'll be getting a lot more from him as we go forward. And we'll possibly wrap up, this entire run, however long this run ends up being. So the writing duties, of course, went with Jerry Duggan, with Pepe Larraz's beautiful work on art, and Marta Gracia for colors. So always a pleasure with that team. So I recommend it. If you're reading the X books, you're reading this anyway. If you haven't been reading the X-Men, you could probably jump onto this one, and there's enough information there that you kind of have an idea of what's going on.
Okay, well, you handled a book from the independent sector and from the House of Ideas, so now I will go to the House of Ideas Distinguished Competition. One thing that's great about getting the books through DCBS is the cost. Wonderful, wonderful discounts, even with the shakeups with Diamond, and it's still getting books at a very, very discounted price. But the drawback is I don't get them as often. I get my books once a month, and depending on the shipping, it may be as late as a month. So when I get those books, this is my practice. I know you have something different because I know you have a huge DC backlog. But what I do, what I do is I break up the books by week. So these are all the DC books that came out on June 8th, and I put them in the order that I want to read them. In some ways, it's a way of replicating the order in which they came out. It's just a silly little thing I do, but I do it. So I'm just going to go through the books. I didn't get to everything, but the books that let me show you what I didn't get to. I didn't get to Wonder Woman 773. with the
Oof.
beautiful Pride cover there.
Yep.
And I didn't get to Future State Gotham, whatever. I didn't get to I didn't get to Batman Urban Legends. There's been some good stuff in this anthology book. There's been some stuff, and I
It's
actually
been
didn't.
selling pretty well
Yeah,
too.
and I didn't get through anything with the Pride book. Sometimes I also put the books in the order of the page count, and it's
Mhm.
what is this, an 80 or 100 pager? There's a lot to get through, but
Yeah.
they'll be next up. So out of the books that I did go through, some I'll talk more about than others. I talked about Justice League Last Ride #1 on the show previously. Justice League Last Ride #2 is this book is so good. This book is so good. Chip Zdarsky is such a good team writer, and there's been very few teams that he's written. And what we do get here is a little more of the backstory about what broke up the Justice League, what put them in this position that they were at in the first issue. So while there certainly is forward momentum with the current storyline, there's a good amount that's dedicated to the flashbacks of the conflict with Apocalypse, which left Apocalypse effectively barren, and the League disbanded, and one significant member of the League dead. So we see this story unfolding, and I'm just so impressed with how Zdarsky has a grasp on these characters. Um, there were a couple of moments with the Flash, which I thought were a little off, but I'm also not sure if this is Wally or Barry, and that may be a big difference. If it's Wally, I'm much more comfortable with his dialogue. If it's Barry, I'm not. But it didn't take me out of the story at all. He also writes a great Lobo, and believe me, I am not a fan of Lobo. So for me to say that in any context is someone doing their job well. So a real unexpected pleasure. This book, there was very little press about it before it came out. Initially, I think it was supposed to be digital first and then come out months later, but then they made it like concurrent or something. I'm not exactly sure what had happened there. But really, really loving this book. I got through Rorschach #9.
Mhm.
Yep. Very much a transition issue. We have that private investigator that's out to the house. From what I understand, shit goes crazy in the issue that came out yesterday, #10. But a pretty good transition issue. Not a lot of super heroics, but Jorge Fornes. I mean, his art is so. I mean, like, look at that blood stain. I mean, look at that. I mean, that's something simple, but probably took a long time to get right. So, another unexpected joy is the Joker,
Mm.
written by Tinian with art by March, and again, a pretty much Commissioner Gordon centric book, but dealing with what's going on with the Joker after A Day,
Mm.
where Arkham Asylum blowed up real good, and just some surprises in here. Don't want to reveal too much, but Joker provides some information you weren't expecting to hear from him. So, um, interesting, and we also. It also seems that we're going to have a bit more travel coming up in here. The action takes place in Belize and doesn't look like they're staying there. So I've always loved books that are kind of like world tours. So liking that. Far Sector #12, the final issue. Um, I thought the whole conflict with the aliens that Joe Mullion was dealing with, and the conflict with the AT, and it's not the easiest thing to follow. But the last 20 pages of the book are the resolution of this. So we have some intimate moments with Joe, and I, I enjoyed that so much more than what we had in the previous issues. I do think it's a very well fleshed out character. I'm glad that there's a place for her in the Green Lantern Corps and in the main Green Lantern series, and a principal place for her, as it turns out. Um, the last 20 pages, sorry, the last 11 pages are it's a very different tone from what was previously in the series, and it somehow also ties things together nicely. So it's the end of that series. Batman the Detective, with the scripts by Tom Taylor and the art by Andy Kubert. Again, an older Batman in Europe, and this basically is centered around his relationship with Henri Ducard, who was the um, I guess you could call the private eye more than anything. He was a tracker that taught Batman how to do it, and the two of them have had a very complicated relationship at various times. So this was pretty good. Real fun thing. Batman Scooby Doo mysteries, and you see here there's a lot of poochies, and this story involves Ace. See Ace the Bat Hound there.
Mm-hmm.
And Scooby are judges at a dog show in Gotham City. And you'll also notice on this cover that you get Daphne and you get Shaggy, and you don't get Velma and Fred. That's because Velma and Fred are busy on another case. And I don't remember the Scooby team really being split up too often. So there was some interesting
Well,
dynamics that took place in this story because of that.
well, they did split up. If you remember, they did
Yeah.
split up quite a bit, but they would split up like Fred
But
and
in the
Daphne
same
would go off, and then
story, yeah,
Velma
but
and
in the same story, solving the same case.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is something different from that. They're just not there until the end. And yeah, there's some funny things. Ace becomes much more Scooby-like the more he's exposed to him, especially in the arena of devouring snacks. So,
Jeez.
real cute picture, and look at all the cute doggies. You gotta love that. And then the last book, this one disappointed me a bit. This is we're in Mariko Tamaki's detective comic run.
Mm-hmm.
This is yet another like Bruce Wayne is accused of murder, and it's Gotham, so there's flimsy evidence, and the woman who was murdered is a fellow scion of wealth in Gotham, Sarah Worth, and her father is like insane, and it just didn't gel. And there's a sequence here that basically takes out blocks of Gotham, and it just seems like if I know it's a fictional place, but there's nothing. There can't be anything left of the place. There's like
It's a big city.
I
There's
mean,
chunks of it
what
still
are
like
these
burning, I'm
are
sure,
these
from
urban renewal projects that are like just start to finish or 27 days? I don't it it didn't gel as well, and it's a shame because there were a lot of things in Tamaki's run that I really liked. I liked how she was focusing on Bruce in his compromised financial circumstances and the
Mhm.
neighborhood that he's part of, and for the first time really in his life he had to be a neighbor. um, there was some really interesting things there, and also how she was writing Huntress into the
Mm.
storyline. We do have Huntress at the beginning, and she kind of abruptly leaves. It's a bit awkward. So that was the first issue in the Tamaki run that I wasn't crazy about. But
Could you bring
the
that cover back, because that
sure.
cover is gorgeous.
Mhm. Yep.
I just love the layout there. The logo layout
Hmm.
with what DC's doing with the you know oh gosh, blah, my brain, with the insignias at the top left and right.
Oh yeah,
Um
like Wonder
just
Woman
the
will have her thing. The logos.
Yeah, sort
Yeah.
of like, but the specific
Okay.
logos up there, but it's a great framing.
Yep.
I think
Also,
that's
there's
really
two
nice.
backups in this issue.
Hmm.
One is about a reporter who's come into Bruce's life, and the other is an archives. I don't want to say archive story, but a flashback about Lucius Fox and his early days with Batman. It's written by John Ridley, and I have not been really impressed with John Ridley's Batman work, and this did nothing to boost that to shock me away from that. I mean, it doesn't work, and it's a shame because I've been really enjoying that run, and I think she's an awesome writer, and
Hmm.
just wish it connected with me, and it doesn't at all, like at all, underlined and exclamation point, like at all.
Yeah.
I'm hoping the next issue is a big change from what we got in this thing. So.
Not
Sorry.
every writer has an
Yeah.
on every
Well,
time, but
again, we have an abbreviated episode. So, for the people who have been watching us on the live stream, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to be wrapping up this show. And when we wrap an episode of the Comic Book Bears up, we do so with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week segment. In the bear community, if you find a fellow attractive, you woof at him. And we do something very similar here where we signify something which may be a comic book, but it also may be a film or a TV program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener or viewer, may be interested in sampling. I'll start as I always do with my cohort, Steve. Steve, what is your woof of the week?
well, my woof of the week is for a TV show. Shocker. And this one is actually one that's just returning to the airwaves / stream waves, however you consume your content now. And it is the show Miracle Workers. Miracle Workers, which is based on several different books, novellas, and short stories of TV writer Simon Rich. The first season was basically all about heaven. Where the title Miracle Workers comes from, where you get to see God is just lazy, doesn't really give a crap, and is just kind of going to let the earth explode unless his two miracle working angels can figure out a way to make two people fall in love. The second season was all about basically medieval life in a bizarre kingdom, and featured again all the same actors. And this new third season that just started is called Oregon Trail, and it is about the journey to the West, the Wild West, in 1800s US. It is such a great show. It's always hilarious, and the acting, like the ensemble cast, which stays the same throughout each series, just playing different characters, is always amazing. I mean, you've got Geraldine Viswanathan, you've got Steve Buscemi, you've got Harry Potter himself, whose name that my brain just totally skipped on. Daniel Radcliffe, yes.
Yeah. I had the first
Daniel
name.
Radcliffe, and a rotating cast of others that are just absolutely a joy to watch interact with each other and just be goofy as all get out. The dialogue is always very snappy and modern, but making fun of sort of the situations that these characters find themselves in that time period. So wonderful stuff. Lots of commentary on life, the universe, politics, and everything. But I really recommend it. It's on TBS in the US. I'm not sure where it would be overseas, probably some other streaming service, or Hulu as well. It'll be on, but yeah, check it out. It's called Miracle Workers Season 3, Oregon Trail.
Okay. My woof of the week goes out to a television documentary, and it's a television documentary that Steve gave me the heads up on, and I'm very glad he did. And it's named The Kinks Echoes of the World. And it is a documentary about the group from the 60s, The Kinks. And in 1968, they put out an album called The Kinks or the Village Green Preservation Society. And it really was the Kinks at their most pastoral English phase, I guess. And, it was around the same time as records, some of their singles like Waterloo Sunset and Sunny Afternoon and Autumn Almanac. And the show does some really interesting things, some very insightful people that they provided for the interview subjects, including Paul Weller and Natalie Merchant, Andy Partridge from XTC, Graham Coxon from Blur, Noel Gallagher from Oasis, Steve Craddock from Paul Weller's band, and also Ocean Color Scene. It's just Suggs from Madness. All of these acts have some connective tissue to the Kinks. And one thing I also loved is they had each of the interview subjects provide artwork based on one of the songs when they did introduce the conversation about one of the songs that they were the songs from the album that they were talking about. And it really was one of the best music documentaries I've seen in a while. And I'm so glad you let me know about that. And I'm actually kind of planning to watch it again tomorrow because I enjoyed it so much.
It was really good. I didn't know much about the Kinks, after like their original albums and like this in 64, 65, 66. I didn't really know what else they had done, but seeing this just really gave me a really interesting perspective into into this band. I mean, they had some huge hits in the early mid 60s that were big internationally, and then just kind of disappeared on this side of the Atlantic.
But then they came back, but then they came back
and then they
big
came
time,
back.
and in the late 70s and early 80s were actually an arena act for a time. That's how I first saw them in 1983 at the Brendan Byrne Arena. And also, just a lot of emotional turmoil. Any band that has two brothers, I think that's just a guarantee. So as you do explore the Kinks catalog and the Kinks history, you're not going to be bored. Let's put it that way. All right, we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears Podcast. If you want to write to us, please do so by sending an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. And if you want to listen to us, again, if you've been watching us, we really do appreciate that. But if you do prefer the audio version, if this is how we're coming to you, you can download us through iTunes. You can listen to us through Stitcher Radio and catch us on many of the other podcatching platforms. So until next time, I'm Bill Zanowitz.
I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a woof and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Bye.